During the first dance, my wife's father said, "You don't deserve her." Then she stopped the music and shocked everyone. The moment the music stopped, you could feel the air sucked out of the room. Every eye turned to Sophia, my radiant bride, standing frozen in the middle of the dance floor. Her father's words, sharp, cold, and deliberate, hung like a storm cloud over the reception. "You don't deserve her." I stood there, my hand still on her waist, my heart pounding as her grip tightened on my shoulders. Then, in a single breathtaking moment, Sophia stepped back, raised her hand and signaled the DJ to cut the music. The silence was deafening. What she did next left every guest speechless. Hey there. Before we dive deeper into this story, I want to know, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below, and let's see how far this tale travels. Now let's get back to that unforgettable wedding day in the heart of Charleston, South Carolina. It was a perfect June evening, the kind where the sunset paints the sky in hues of pink and gold. The venue, a charming low-country estate draped in Spanish moss, felt like something out of a dream. White roses lined the tables, fairy lights twinkled above, and the scent of magnolias floated through the warm air. Sophia looked like a vision in her lace gown, her dark hair swept up, a soft smile lighting her face as she greeted guests. "I'm James, by the way," her groom, still pinching myself that she said yes. To everyone watching, we were the picture-perfect couple, ready to start our lives together. But beneath the laughter and clinking glasses, something was brewing. A tension I couldn't quite place. Sophia's family was there in full force. Her father, Richard, a stern man with a handshake like a vice grip, had always been distant with me. Her mother, Diane, was warmer but fluttered around nervously, adjusting table settings and whispering to relatives. Then there was Sophia's younger sister, Emily, who shot me tight-lipped smiles that never reached her eyes. My family was smaller. My parents, a few cousins, and my best man, Mike, who kept the mood light with his terrible dance moves. The guests, about 100 of them, filled the room with chatter, their faces glowing with the joy of the occasion. Or so I thought. As the evening unfolded, I noticed little things. A glance between Richard and Emily, when Sophia and I shared a quiet moment. A hushed conversation between Diane and her sister, Aunt Clara, that stopped when I walked by. Nothing overt, just enough to make my stomach twist. Sophia, though, seemed oblivious, her laughter bright as she twirled through the crowd, thanking everyone for coming. She was the heart of the night, and I couldn't take my eyes off her. But every time Richard looked my way, his jaw tightened, like he was holding back words that burned to be said. The stakes were high that night. This wasn't just a wedding, it was a promise. A union of two families, a moment we'd planned for over a year. Sophia and I had been together for 3 years, building a life in Charleston after meeting at a local coffee shop where she spilled her latte on my shoes. We laughed about it then, and we'd been laughing ever since. But her family's approval, especially Richard's, had always felt like a hurdle. He was old school, protective, the kind of man who believed no one was good enough for his daughter. I'd tried to win him over, helping with projects at their house, showing up to every family dinner. But his coolness never thawed. Still, I thought we'd made it through. The ceremony had gone off without a hitch, vows exchanged, rings on fingers. What could go wrong now? As the night progressed, the reception hummed with energy. The band played soft jazz and guests sipped champagne, their voices blending into a warm buzz. Sophia and I moved through the traditions, cutting the cake, tossing the bouquet, each moment feeling like a step toward forever. But those small nagging moments kept creeping in. Emily's forced laugh when I thanked her for her toast, Diane's quick glance at Richard when I pulled Sophia close during a slow song. I brushed it off, telling myself it was just nerves. Weddings bring out strange emotions, right? Then came the first dance. The band struck up At Last by Etta James, Sophia's favorite. We stepped onto the dance floor, her hand in mine, her eyes sparkling under the lights. The crowd gathered around, phones out, capturing the moment. For a minute, it was just us. Her warmth, her smile, the way she leaned into me like I was her safe place. I whispered something silly in her ear, and she laughed, her head tilting back. That's when Richard approached. He'd been standing at the edge of the crowd, arms crossed, watching us. I thought he was just coming to cut in, a father-daughter moment. But as he stepped closer, his face was hard, his eyes locked on me. "James," he said, his voice low but cutting through the music like a knife. "You don't deserve her." The words hit like a punch. Sophia froze, her hand tightening in mine. The crowd didn't hear. They were too far, too caught up in the moment. But I felt the weight of every syllable. My face burned, my mind racing. What did he mean? Why now? I looked at Sophia, expecting her to laugh it off, to smooth things over like she always did. But her expression had changed. Her eyes narrowed, her lips pressed into a thin line. She stepped back out of my arms and raised her hand toward the DJ booth. The music stopped abruptly, the notes fading into a heavy silence. Every guest turned to us. The air felt thick like the room was holding its breath. Sophia's chest rose and fell, her gaze flicking from her father to me, then back again. I could see the storm in her eyes, a mix of hurt and fury I'd never seen before. She opened her mouth, and I knew whatever came next would change everything. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating, as Sophia stood in the center of the dance floor. Her hand was still raised, signaling the DJ to keep the music off. The fairy lights above flickered softly, casting shadows across her face, now a mask of barely contained emotion. I could feel every pair of eyes in the room, guests, family, friends, locked on us, their murmurs starting to ripple through the crowd. My heart pounded, my shirt suddenly too tight under my tuxedo jacket. What was she going to say? What had her father's words unlocked? Sophia turned to Richard, her father, who stood just a few feet away, his face unreadable but his posture rigid, like a man bracing for a fight. "Dad," she said, her voice steady but laced with something sharp. "What did you just say to James?" Her tone wasn't loud, but it carried, slicing through the tension like a blade. The guests leaned in, some craning their necks, others whispering to their neighbors. I caught Mike, my best man, shifting uncomfortably at the edge of the crowd, his usual grin gone. Richard didn't back down. He straightened, his grey eyes cold. "I said what I meant, Sophia. He doesn't deserve you." His voice was louder now, deliberate, like he wanted the room to hear. A gasp rippled through the crowd. Diane, Sophia's mother, clutched her champagne flute, her face paling as she stepped toward Richard, whispering something urgent. He brushed her off with a flick of his hand, his focus still on me. I felt my cheeks burn, the weight of his words sinking deeper. Undeserving. The accusations stung, but worse was the way Sophia's gaze flickered to me, searching, questioning. "Dad, stop!" Emily, Sophia's sister, hissed from the side, her voice tight. She'd been hovering near the cake table, her arms crossed, but now she stepped forward, her heels clicking on the wooden floor. "This isn't the time." Her words were meant to calm, but her tone was sharp, almost accusing, and her eyes darted to me with a flash of something. Disdain. Jealousy. I couldn't tell. The room felt like it was closing in, the warmth of the evening turning claustrophobic. Sophia's hand dropped to her side, but she didn't break eye contact with her father. "You've been holding that in all night, haven't you?" she said, her voice low but trembling with anger. "No. All year. Maybe longer." The crowd was silent now, the kind of silence that makes your ears ring. I wanted to speak, to defend myself, to ask what I'd done to earn this, but my throat was dry, my feet rooted to the spot. Sophia's eyes flicked to me again, softer this time, but there was a storm brewing behind them. Richard took a step closer, his voice dropping but no less cutting. "I've watched you, James. You're charming, sure. You've got everyone fooled with your smiles and your promises. But I see through it. You're not good enough for my daughter. You'll never be." Each word landed like a blow, and I felt the eyes of the guests, my cousins, Sophia's aunts, our friends, boring into me. Some looked shocked, others curious. A few even nodded slightly, as if they'd been waiting for someone to say it. "Richard, please," Diane pleaded, her voice breaking as she grabbed his arm. But he shook her off again, his focus unrelenting. I caught Aunt Clara in the corner of my eye, her lips pursed, whispering something to another relative. The murmurs grew louder, a low hum of speculation. Had they all been talking about me behind my back? Doubting me? The thought twisted in my gut, but what hurt more was Sophia's silence. She was still staring at her father, her hands clenched into fists, her breath uneven. Then Emily spoke up again, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Sophia, maybe Dad has a point. I mean, come on, we all know James isn't exactly—" She trailed off, her eyes flicking to me with a smirk that felt like a slap. "Stable. Financially, I mean. Or otherwise." The room seemed to tilt. Stable? I'd built a steady career as a graphic designer, maybe not a fortune, but enough to give Sophia the life she deserved. Or so I thought. The accusation hung in the air, and I saw a few guests exchange glances, their whispers growing bolder. "Emily, enough!" Sophia snapped, her voice finally breaking through the haze. She turned to her sister, her eyes blazing. "You've been throwing shade at James all night. Those little comments, those looks. I'm not blind." Her words were like sparks, igniting the tension that had been simmering beneath the surface. Emily flinched, her face reddening, but she didn't back down. "I'm just saying what everyone's thinking," she shot back, crossing her arms. "You deserve better, Soph." The words echoed her father's, and I felt the ground shift beneath me. Was this what they all thought? That I was some kind of fraud, unworthy of the woman I loved? I looked at Sophia, desperate for her to say something, to shut this down. But she was trembling now, her eyes darting between her father, her sister, and me. The band stood awkwardly behind their instruments, the DJ frozen at his booth. The guests were no longer whispering. They were openly staring, some with pity, others with curiosity, like this was a show they'd paid to see. Then Sophia's gaze locked on mine, and for a moment it was just us again. Her eyes softened, but there was something else there. Hurt, maybe, or doubt. "James," she said quietly, her voice barely audible over the hum of the crowd. "Is there something you're not telling me?" My stomach dropped. "What?" I opened my mouth, but no words came. The room was spinning, the tension coiling tighter with every second. Richard's stare burned into me. Emily's smirk lingered, and Sophia, my Sophia, was waiting for an answer I didn't know how to give. The question hung in the air like a guillotine. Sophia's words, "Is there something you're not telling me?" echoed in my ears, each syllable tightening the knot in my chest. The Charleston estate, once glowing with warmth and celebration, now felt like a courtroom with me on trial. The guests were statues, their eyes darting between Sophia, her father, Richard, her sister, Emily, and me. The fairy lights above seemed to dim, the air thick with anticipation. I opened my mouth to speak, to tell her there was nothing, that I loved her, that I'd spent every day since we met trying to be the man she deserved. But before I could, Richard took a step forward, his voice booming across the silent room. "Tell her, James," he said, his tone dripping with accusation. "Tell her about the debt." The word landed like a thunderclap. Debt? My mind raced, scrambling to make sense of it. Yes, I had some student loans, a small credit card balance from planning the wedding, but nothing catastrophic. Nothing I hadn't already shared with Sophia. I looked at her, my heart pounding, expecting her to nod to confirm she knew. But her eyes widened, a flicker of confusion crossing her face. The crowd murmured, the sound swelling like a wave. "Dad, what are you talking about?" Sophia's voice was sharp now, cutting through the whispers. She turned to me, her brow furrowed, her hands still clenched at her sides. "James, what debt?" The hurt in her voice was worse than any of Richard's accusations. I felt my face flush, my palms sweating. "Sophia, it's just the usual stuff," I said, my voice cracking. "The loans, the card, we talked about this, didn't we?" But her expression didn't soften. She looked back at her father, then at Emily, who was watching with a smug glint in her eye, like she'd been waiting for this moment. Richard didn't give me a chance to explain. "Usual stuff?" he scoffed, loud enough for the back of the room to hear. "You call $30,000 in credit card debt usual? Or the car loan you're behind on? Or the fact you've been dodging calls from collectors?" My stomach dropped. How did he know? I hadn't hidden anything major from Sophia, but the way he spun it made it sound like I was drowning in secrets. The car loan was a few months behind, sure, but I was working on it. The credit card was higher than I'd let on, maybe. But 30,000? That was exaggerated, wasn't it? The crowd's whispers grew louder, a chorus of judgment. I saw my cousin Mark shift uncomfortably, his wife whispering something in his ear. Diane, Sophia's mother, looked like she might cry, her hands twisting the napkin she held. Emily stepped closer, her voice softer but no less venomous. "Sophia, I tried to warn you. I heard him on the phone last week arguing with some bank. He's not who you think he is." Her words were a knife, twisting deeper with every syllable. I wanted to scream that it wasn't true, that Emily was twisting things, but the doubt in Sophia's eyes stopped me cold. "Enough!" Sophia's voice rang out, sharp and commanding. She stepped toward the DJ booth, her gown swishing against the floor, and grabbed the microphone. The feedback squealed for a moment, making everyone wince, but she didn't flinch. She stood tall, her dark eyes blazing under the lights, her chest heaving with emotion. The room fell silent again, every guest frozen, waiting. My heart was in my throat. Was she about to call off the wedding? Expose me? Defend me? I couldn't read her, and that scared me more than anything. "Everyone listen," Sophia said, her voice steady but trembling with intensity. "This is my wedding day, my day, and I'm not going to let it be ruined by half-truths and family drama." She turned to Richard, her gaze unwavering. "Dad, you've never trusted James. You've made that clear since the day we got engaged, but you don't get to stand here in front of everyone we love and tear him down without proof." The crowd gasped softly, a few heads nodding in approval. I felt a flicker of hope, but it was short-lived. She turned to Emily next, her eyes narrowing. "And you, Em, I've seen the way you look at James, the way you whisper behind my back. If you have something to say it now. Stop hiding behind Dad's shadow." Emily's face flushed, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. The room was electric, every guest leaning forward, hanging on Sophia's every word. Then she looked at me and the world seemed to stop. "James," she said, her voice softer but no less firm, "if there's anything you haven't told me, now's the time." My mouth went dry. I wanted to tell her it was nothing, that Richard and Emily were blowing things out of proportion. But the way she looked at me, searching for the truth, made me question myself. Had I been honest enough? Had I downplayed my financial stress to protect her? I stepped toward her, my hands shaking, ready to speak. But before I could, Emily grabbed the microphone from Sophia's hand. "Fine," she said, her voice shaking with anger. "You want the truth? James isn't just in debt. He's been lying to you about where he's been. Those late nights at work? Ask him about the bar downtown. Ask him about Lauren." The name hit like a bomb. Lauren? My old college friend who I'd run into once at a bar months ago. It was nothing, a quick catch-up over drinks, but the way Emily said it made it sound like an affair. The crowd erupted in gasps, heads turning, eyes wide with shock. Sophia's face went pale, her hand dropping to her side. She stared at me, her eyes filling with tears, and I knew this was the moment everything could break. The name Lauren exploded in the room like a grenade. Gasps echoed from every corner, phones lowered as guests stared, wide-eyed and whispering furiously. Sophia's face drained of color, her eyes locked on mine, filled with a mix of betrayal and confusion that cut deeper than any words. Tears welled up, threatening to spill, and she clutched the microphone tighter, her knuckles white. Emily stood there, smug satisfaction on her face, like she'd finally unleashed a secret she'd been hoarding. Richard nodded subtly, his arms crossed as if this proved his point. The air was thick with shock, the kind that makes time slow down. I felt exposed, stripped bare in front of everyone we knew. "Sophia," I said, my voice breaking as I stepped toward her. "It's not what you think. Lauren is just an old friend from college. We bumped into each other at a bar a few months ago. Pure chance. We talked for maybe 20 minutes about old times. That's it. Nothing more." My words tumbled out, desperate and raw, but the doubt in her eyes lingered. The crowd was murmuring louder now, a wave of judgment crashing over me. I could see my parents in the back, their faces etched with worry, my mum's hand over her mouth. Emily snorted, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Just friends, then why hide it? Why the late nights?" She turned to Sophia, her tone pleading now, like she was the victim. "Soph, I saw the messages on his phone when he left it at the house last week. He's been keeping things from you." "Messages? What messages?" "A quick hello from Lauren after that meetup, nothing flirty, nothing secret. but twisted like this, it sounded damning. The room spun, the fairy lights blurring as heat rose in my chest. Sophia's gaze shifted from me to Emily, then to Richard. Her tears finally fell, streaking her makeup, but her voice was steel when she spoke into the microphone. "You two," she said, pointing at her father and sister, "have been waiting for this moment. Dad, you've never given James a chance because he didn't fit your perfect mold. Rich, connected, like the guys you tried to set me up with. And Emily, you've been jealous since day one. Jealous that I found someone who loves me for me, not for what I can give them." The words landed like blows, and the crowd's murmurs turned to stunned silence. Emily's smugness crumbled, her face reddening as she stammered, "That's not true." "It is true," Sophia cut her off, her voice rising with a fury that electrified the room. "You dug into James's life, twisted every little thing to make him look bad. The debt, its student loans and wedding costs, we discussed it. The bar, a harmless run-in, but you couldn't stand seeing me happy, could you?" She turned to the guests, her eyes scanning the faces. "Everyone, I'm sorry for this mess. But the real secret here isn't James's. It's my family's resentment." Richard's face fell, his posture slumping as Diane rushed to his side, tears in her eyes. Emily backed away, her hands shaking, the microphone slipping from her grasp. The revelation hit like a wave, washing over the crowd. Guests exchanged glances, some nodding in understanding, others whispering in support. My best man, Mike, started a slow clap, and soon others joined, first hesitant, then building into applause. Sophia handed the microphone back to the DJ and walked to me, her hands finding mine. "James, I believe you," she whispered, pulling me close. The tears were gone, replaced by a fierce determination. The music started up again, softly at first, as the tension broke like a storm passing. In the aftermath, the reception shifted. Richard approached us later, his voice low and broken. "I was wrong, James. I let my fears blind me. Can you forgive an old fool?" We shook hands, awkward but genuine, and Diane hugged Sophia tightly, whispering apologies. Emily slinked away early, her embarrassment palpable, and though it took time, she and Sophia mended fences months later over coffee and honest talks. The wedding continued stronger, with laughs and dances that felt more real, unburdened by hidden tensions. Guests came up to us, sharing their own family stories, turning the night into a bond rather than a battle. As the evening wound down, Sophia and I slipped outside under the stars, the Spanish moss swaying in the breeze. We talked, really talked, about the debts, the doubts, promising no more secrets. Our marriage started not with perfection, but with truth, and that made it unbreakable. Looking back, that night taught me that weddings aren't just about vows. They're about facing the storms together. Family can hurt, but love can heal. What do you think? Have you ever had a family moment that turned everything upside down? Share in the comments below, and if this story hit home, hit that subscribe button for more real-life tales that remind us we're all human. Thanks for watching.